Hello, I'm Anita White. I'm a life coach with WhiteLighter Coaching Quest in Stillwater, Minnesota. Welcome to my show, Coaching Conversations. The focus of the show is just to have a light conversation with someone in our community about how we find our divine purpose and live a life with intention. And today I have Jeffery Grundtner from Marine, is that right?
Marine at St. Croix, yes.
Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Anita. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Great, I'm glad you could make it.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about you and your life.
Well, you know, as with anyone, that would be a broad topic. So your opening statement is a very interesting way to open things and approach it. Is how do we live our life with intent and find the divine purpose? I remember there's an old-fashioned phrase that goes something like, to leave the world a better place for having lived, loved, and labored here.
Oh, yeah.
And it's such a wonderful, container in terms of like, how can one get up in the morning and make clear decisions about how to live well? And yet I think people today, there's a lot of people trying to find what is their purpose in life, what is their divine purpose. At least a lot of the people that I'm connected with, I know that there's a lot of people who are also just kind of living their life. And I think that the challenge that folks are having is knowing that they are more than their existence is right now, that they can be more than that, and how do they define or find their way to that. I personally was, I suppose one could say, very fortunate in that. When you ask, well, what would be my purpose and intention? Out of what most would consider a tragedy or a very difficult circumstance, that at age 11, having gone through a near-death experience in being in a deep coma for 3 days, and that just mind-boggling, transformative experience.
Tell me more about that. How did you end up in a coma?
Well, I became a type 1 diabetic, and it was was not diagnosed for many weeks. So, I was 10 going on 11, and I basically, my body was consuming itself in a sense. So by the time it was really diagnosed, I was really on the edge, and I'd gone into the hospital, and I was slipping in and out, and was in a state of delirium, and was on some level, on some body consciousness level or something, was aware of that, because as the technician was attaching an EKG, I asked what they were doing, and he said they were making a record from whatever he described. My delirious 10-year-old mind had translated into that, taking my life force and making a paper record of it. And so I began to cry at that point, thinking, what was going on.
Like you were leaving a download or something for them to
exactly
examine later.
Right. But, it's all very vivid to me, even now, decades later. The room was receding, and the next thing I knew, I was out of my body and then just like zoomed off. And I had this incredible visionary experience, as I would describe it today. And when I came back, it was as if no time had passed and a million years had passed.
So what happened in that visionary experience?
Well, it's far too much to describe in detail here, but in terms of our topic for today, I'll describe two things, one of which was fairly personal, of kind of coming to a realization that as I was observing others having their life going on for them, and people I knew and loved, and people that I loved and didn't know yet, which was a peculiar thing, quote unquote, didn't know yet.
Yeah.
So it was a sense of in that expanded state of having touched more of our eternal selves that we all are, but in expanding beyond the boundaries of this temporal and physical world, what I was able to see was what was life going to be like had I died at that time. And as I became aware there was somebody I wanted to reach out to help, and knew that was the point I knew I wasn't there. And I can also say that I had always felt all along that there was this enormous presence, this enormous benefic presence with me the whole time. But I couldn't exactly turn around and look and see or whatever. But I definitely felt guided. And the other part, that's the first part, that's sort of the personal awareness that, okay, I'm having an experience that is beyond, you know, the life I knew. And then having more of awareness of having touched more of the eternal self, of a purpose that I could apply myself to, and seeing again potentials. In fact, I'll just state right here that one of the things that I saw at the time were some of the challenges that we're having right now on the earth. Not that I fully understood that. I mean, and when I see an 11-year-old today, and I think, oh my God, I was that tiny, you know, I mean, that young, and I had this experience. Because it just totally took me out of, you know, that kid world reality, and contemplating, you know, some the meaning of life, if you will,
right,
and not having a real good context of what to put it in. And yet I was aware, I was very, I mean, incredibly sensitively aware what we would call today to either be an empath or a psychic or something, and having that kind of connection, and then what to do with it in ordinary life was the challenge. And it wasn't until decades later, in connecting with some very spiritual people, a Native American medicine man for one, that I was able to put it in some kind of a context. Now, I mentioned that gave me some sense of, it gave me some information at least about, well, what could I apply my life to? What would be a purpose, a divine purpose, or how to live with an intent. The fact that it took me so long to actually figure out that this wasn't just some pie-in-the-sky notion, which is what life as it is constructed, at least in my experience, and I think in others, there's a certain construction of way things are supposed to be, and it didn't fit that, so I didn't accept it. I didn't accept myself in many ways, not until decades later. And to come to that understanding and then try to figure out, okay, well, how now do I apply myself to those things, which I've done the best I could. You know, there's always the feeling that, well, there was so much more, and I think the fortunate thing is I feel like I still have, I hope, a fair amount of life to live to realize more of it. But in that sense of like, okay, well, I kind of knew my divine purpose, even if it took me a little while to realize, and it took the help of others to realize it, that there was still a challenge in living with intention and to try to realize that purpose. And as I've thought about that, one of the realities is, and this kind of speaks to that larger issue that I started with, well, people are seeking that. I think there's, we know that we're in a time of where humanity has reached a certain point in how we've really spread all over the earth, and we've created this incredible technology and civilization and so on. And but that there's the systems and the structures that got us to that point.
Mm-hmm.
They always had flaws, but they are especially now not really consistent with where we have the sense in our heart and our spirit where we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Using my own personal story as an example, I had a sense of, well, these are the things that we need to do. And in particular, one of the very strong things was, for me, it is just a reality, just a no-brainer, no question that we are the earth. Our bodies are the earth. Our life is the gift of the planet that we live on.
Mm-hmm.
We keep talking about the environment as though it's out there.
Yeah.
And that disconnect, I actually was wondering this the other night and watching a television program about, some of the animals that are the last of their species and so on, and some of the comments that were made, and I just kind of wondered, how did we ever get so far from the fundamental notion that we are the life of the earth?
Yeah.
And that somehow the environment is just something out there, and it's an object or something, and the water that is coursing through your body comes out of a river or out of the ground. It's the same water.
Yeah.
And we can say these things. The air is the same air that we breathe, that we share with the plants and the animals, and all of that is the life that we're given. And yet I see that the societal structures don't really honor that. We don't have that as a fundamental principle, as a fundamental value.
Yeah.
So I kind of see a notion of, well, the values that we've built our society around are, at this point, there's a lot of conflict or re-examining, well, what values are we really going to live by? And if you start asking a person on an individual basis, I think most, in my experience, will start to tell you things that aren't always consistent with what society tells us. So that tension, that disconnect is where we are in terms of creating, that world that is a better place for having lived, loved, and labored here. And to me, it's, even though I've been talking about our physical life, it is also I had this incredible spiritual experience to come to a lot of realizations. And I think that often when people are asking, how do we have a divine purpose, and they think about something spiritual that is beyond their life. And the reason I like that phrase, which I actually just kind of remembered this morning, is an old mentor had used to say that often. And I just sort of remembered it this morning. It's like, let's not forget to have life, and that life is of the earth. So having a spiritual life is those two things, which is another part of you ask, going back to the question of the purpose is, bringing myself to the greatest realization that I can, but also helping others in that understanding and seeing how those things come together. And again, there's a notion that there is a separation, and there is on one level, but on the other, we want to be able to understand how they are one and how they do come together.
Yeah. So that's kind of on a conscious level that people see each other as separate beings.
Right.
And I always ask people to take a look at the world through the lens of the space shuttle, because that's where you see one organism all working together and flowing in one planetary motion. And it's all fluid and it's all perfect in harmony. Nothing can be out of balance from where you see it there. And we have that universe in our bodies, like you were talking about. We have that stuff that we can move and shift. And if I am ecological in my system, which means that I have good nutrition and I have a good spiritual life and I have emotional stability and I'm intentional about where I'm bringing my life, then I bring that ecological statement inside. And
Yes.
when I'm living from that place, then I can simply live that out. In an earlier conversation with someone here in the studio, we were talking about how we wake up in the morning and set our intentions for the day, and how that we put a mindset on what we need to heal, transform, or if we just let our emotions run rampant. And I have a client that comes in and he lets his depression decide when it's going to leave, not that he's going to, manage the state he's in and do some things to help that change. And that we, with our minds, are the things, yes, that separate us from other people, but we all really are interconnected.
Absolutely.
And because we seek out people that will help us with whatever that problem is. And through a number of these shows, and it's always my question, it seems like that when I'm with people, and I think that's how the show became a reality, was that if people are in touch or thinking about what their divine purpose is, we all have an incredible special reason for being here. And
Right.
mine is not the same focus as yours, but in the long run has kind of the same result. Because what I think about my divine purpose is that if I can help one person heal, and they can help one person heal, then as a planet we will heal, one
Right.
person at a time. Because we get more mindful about what we're putting in our bodies and get more nutritious with our eating, and start tapping more into the raw foods that are grown in the earth and start doing that for ourselves. And so there's a lot of ways that we help manifest that lovingness with the ground and with the air and with the water and with the sun, that we start bringing that inside of us because we're looking for it.
Yes, and once we realize that, on an individual basis about creating health within our own body and make that connection that your body really is a product of the earth, then it's much easier to start to, I would hope, that people, if they start getting a stronger emotional and visceral connection and not just a mental connection, because we talk about environmental science and you can, there's statistics that just overwhelm us. I think that's one of the things that happen.
Right.
People, they'll hear about what we as human beings can do to the planet at this point, because we're not, because of how we've structured our life, and we need to be in a process of restructuring it.
Yeah.
Restructuring it, and not saying that, it was all bad before, but how can we go forward from here? But that idea of how we can heal ourselves, because at this point in time, you can probably obviously tell that I work with the earth, and I have done a lot of work that way of designing landscapes and environments. But at this point, I'm doing a lot of work as a healer and a counselor, and helping people to reconnect on a deep level to themselves, that fundamental piece. And I'm still doing the stuff with the earth, and we'll probably come back to that more strongly. But right now, I'm wanting to write, and for a long time, I didn't have the sense that my stories were any more important or worthy of a book than other people's, or or things that are already out there. But as I've observed, if I get to talking about some of the experiences and how I've applied myself, then people are getting something from it and saying, "Are you writing this?" So but the message has been strong and clear, and but that's what I want to do. And I think that the notion of being able to write the stories can take the things that we're just touching the tippy top here, and develop at a deeper level, and that could somehow help other people to get in touch more with themselves and with the planet, and how to have a in the native way, it would be how to live your life in a good way, how to walk on the earth in a sacred manner. And that includes all of those things, how to be the most healthful within yourself and within your community, and on the earth, because of the oneness that is there. So
so what kind of things are you doing to get that book started.
Ah.
Yeah. I've been writing for a long time too, and I've got some things that are documented. You know, I've got my table of contents written and a biography written, and you know, ideas on how I want to start the manuscript, and I've got probably 2 or 3 titles to books that I'm inspired to do too.
Right.
One
well,
of the things I realized, I did a healing pilgrimage not long ago, and it was a big part of my self as a teenager that was deeply wounded.
Sure.
And so I made a plan on how I was going to do this, and I actually took a camera home from the studio and documented what I was going to do. And I just sat with myself and said out loud what my intentions were going to be in order to heal that part of myself and what I was going to do. And an hour went by before I was done talking.
Wow.
And then when I came back from the pilgrimage, I did a debrief, and that only took 10 minutes. So I had it, so it's already recorded. And I know there are people, even like if you do dictation, that you can actually get someone that will type it out for you, what you've said. So there's simpler ways than just putting pen to paper. And for me, it's now I've got that big piece of my life that was horrified for years, that was really broken. It kept me from doing a lot of things in my life. Having good relationships with men was one of them. Because I always had this piece of me that was broken, and once that stopped being broken and I had taken that healing pilgrimage, I not only felt the shift inside, I just stopped selling myself off. And I was better connected with everything. But I had to do that process of talking about it, and I told other people what I was going to do. And I had another spiritual healer go with me on the journey, so she was there to experience it and witness it with me, and witness me in that experience. So it helped kind of contain it with, now I have an intention of using that material. And I'm like, maybe this is just going to be the greatest movie on earth. But you know, it's a great story, and it's a very compelling story.
Yeah.
But I needed to capture it in the moment that it was happening, and to really document what my journey was.
I think there's a real value to that. I mean, you know, to answer, you posed several interesting things, and one would be that I only have bits and pieces that I've written, and I have often thought that when I'm really connected, when I'm all aligned and I'm on, when people are really responsive to me, is when I'm telling the story. Because you're living out of your heart at that point, and out of your genuine experience, and you're not trying to, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I'm always reworking the sentence as I'm going along, which is a tedious and laborious process. So I've tried to set up situations where, you know, to try to get speech recognition software and so on, those kinds of things. But I'm still, I mean, you know, the other piece that you mentioned was that we each have our own healing journey, and there was lots of parts of myself that were broken and still are. I'm still working on them, you know, which is an interesting thing. You know, we as healers or counselors or whatever, helping other people, and we all still need that ourselves, which I think is also another relatively new concept I'm speaking from the broader perspective again, in the social world. If you're a leader or you're a healer, it used to be that there was some false notion that person was already fulfilled or arrived and you know, there to dispense wisdom, and and that's not the case. We're all doing this, and it goes back to the notion we each have some unique purpose, and for some like us, it's to help others, and however we manage to do that, and that's a significant part of our purpose, and others is to serve. But back to the writing, is I haven't you know, I haven't gotten over all the blocks to actually start to work it, you know, to really make it start to manifest. And, you know, and I think a real part of that is some sense of that, well, I do need to make a living. How am I going to make a living and do my writing at the same time? And I'm well aware that a lot of people do it. A lot of people do it. I just haven't figured out how to yet.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you what I do.
Yeah?
I write 10 minutes a day.
Sure. Yeah.
And 10 minutes adds up really fast. And even though I haven't got an idea of when I'll publish, I know that there's one project that I want to have actually to my illustrator by August. I want the whole thing done. I'm doing a card deck, and it's just for me it was a interesting way of putting together our chakra messages as well as what our healing self messages are with the pieces that are broken messages. So it's a positive sort of affirmation, but it's setting an intention as well. So I can't remember how I put it, what I titled the thing right now, but so I've got a deadline for myself, but I do something every day for 10 minutes working on that. And some of it is I'm doing some research because I don't know what will speak to me, and it's not all coming in naturally. So, well, it's not coming in naturally, then I'm just going to do research until it does come naturally.
Sure.
You know, it's kind of like a friend of mine talks about his sister sitting at the keyboard, and she's waiting for her music to come to her. And it might be that she plays around on the keyboard for a little while, and a few days go by, but then eventually in 20 minutes she has something composed. And that's how my writing is. It's like I just keep a little bit at a time, and something eventually just takes off, and then I'm through it and in it. So it's just to challenge you, 10 minutes a day.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I don't know, you know who Wayne Dyer is?
Oh, sure.
He sets up a sacred space where he goes out on retreat, and as soon as he wakes up in the morning, he starts writing. He starts, you know, talking to his higher source, and he starts writing right away. And that's the first thing that he does every day, is he writes. You know, the guy's got a lot of books and a lot of great messages. And for me, it's like that raw stuff right out of you come out of that sleep time. So you're really getting, for me, it's more spiritual right before I go to sleep, and then right when I wake up, I'm way more at peace. And I set my attention.
Yeah, we're much more, you know, connected to our whole self as opposed to the focused self, which has to, you know, get from point A to point B and
that unconscious mind is still kind of operating the show.
Exactly. Yeah, which is a good thing. Yeah, I have some of the richest times are my morning meditations, my morning contemplations.
There you go. There you go.
So I'll turn them into some writing.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jeff, for coming in today. I need to wrap up the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure.
Great. And I'm Anita White. I'm a life coach with WhiteLighter Coaching Quest. Thank you for watching my show, Coaching Conversations. And I want to leave you with one last thought. No matter what you think you are always so much more than that.